Let's see if I got this right. Iroh spoke up. When you told me that you were going on a scouting trip to find leads on the Avatar, you actually meant you were going to break into one of the Fire Nation's most secure strongholds to spy on Zhao. Uncle lifted his eyes to meet Zuko's. The teenager nodded. A ship under Zhao's command had forced them off their course. Zuko had felt like returning the favor, so to speak, so he had snuck into Baiho's stronghold to eavesdrop on Zhao. And while there, Uncle went on, you learned that not only has Commander Zhao been promoted to the rank of Admiral, but that he intends to use the Yuyan archers to capture the Avatar. Zuko rolled his eyes. Was Uncle going to repeat everything back to him? Zuko was starting to regret his promise to let Iroh know where he was going and what he was up to, even when he only had been gone a few hours. Zuko tried to be patient. He knew Uncle worried he would disappear again, and Zuko could hardly blame him for that. Yes or no? Uncle urged. Yes. Okay. Uncle sighed. I have to admit that the story so far doesn't surprise me. It sounds exactly like something my foolhardy nephew would do. But here's the part that I don't understand. After learning all this, you intend to do nothing about it? Zuko closed his eyes and grimaced before answering. Yes. Zuko, if you think for 1 second that the Admiral wants to capture the Avatar for any other reason than self-interest, I have to inform you that you're wrong. The man cares only for himself. I know, Zuko said. Zuko had been sitting on a mattress, leaning against the far wall of his room, but needed to lean forward and wave his hands around as he explained his reasoning. Even if Zhao's motives are less than noble, that doesn't mean what he's doing won't help our nation. The Avatar is dangerous and needs to be stopped. If Zhao stands a chance of pulling that off, who am I to stand in his way? Zuko looked away and tried to calm himself. It wasn't Uncle's fault the situation sucked. In reality, Zuko wanted nothing more than to go out there and do something crazy to put an end to Zhao's plans. However, if he truly believed that capturing the Avatar was more important than going home, he should do nothing. The prince had never respected the Admiral, and these days he outright despised the man. However, when Zuko had weighed in his head which was more important, getting even with Zhao, or that the Avatar would be captured, it wasn't even a contest. Zuko couldn't risk the safety of his nation for a petty grudge. He had to be better than that. Zuko glanced Iroh's way to see if his uncle looked angry. He didn't. He looked unreadable and serious. Remember when I told you Zhao came looking for you when you were away? Iroh asked. Zuko nodded. While he was here, the Admiral and I had an interesting conversation. 4 days earlier. More tea? The commander declined the offer for the 3rd time. Iroh had made a mental note to wait at least half an hour before offering tea again. He wanted to annoy the other man, but not to the point where he'd get up and walk out of here. Their conversation thus far had been less informative than Iroh had hoped, but the afternoon was still young, and the commander was talking to Iroh. He wasn't somewhere plotting against Zuko, and that alone made this meeting worth Iroh's while. The last time we met, you told us how the Fire Nation world conquest was coming along. Anything new on that front? Iroh steered the conversation not so casually to a more useful topic. The commander would see right through Iroh's attempts to manipulate the direction of the conversation, but Iroh was counting on him to be unable to resist the chance to gloat. Well, Commander took his sweet time answering. I do have several important operations going on as we speak. No doubt you've heard of some of them. There are others that I'm not at liberty to discuss, but even with the respected ex-generals such as yourself, I'm sure you understand. Iroh nodded and sipped his tea. The commander went on. Though now that you ask, things have been going rather well for me personally. Many in the court have praised my recent accomplishments, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Fire Lord himself would soon acknowledge me with a promotion. Iroh had an excellent poker face, but in that moment it completely failed him. Uncle had to cough up tea for several moments, and he could see Zhao's irritation grow as the man saw Iroh's surprised expression. Well, Iroh was surprised, and doubtful. His brother had shown considerable favor to the commander in the past, but Iroh still had a hard time picturing Ozai giving such a promotion to someone for doing what exactly? Trying to capture the Avatar but failing at it? That hasn't been enough to gain Iroh's appreciation for others. Iroh's brother was many things, but merciful wasn't one of them. And surely even Ozai saw that under the ambition and arrogance, Zhao was nowhere near competent enough to be promoted to the rank of admiral. Iroh knew more on the subject of misguided leadership than most. It has been his own ambition and arrogance that got many a man killed at the walls of Ba Sing Se. Now that Iroh had no longer choking on his tea, he had to say something, but what? He couldn't go on with "that's good news" or "I'm happy to hear it," because it was awful news and Iroh was disturbed to hear it. He decided to go with something more truthful instead. "Excuse me." Iroh apologized, wiping his mouth and continuing. "This situation reminds me of an old saying. Praise makes good men better and bad men worse." It wasn't one of the most subtle things Iroh could have said, but it did leave just enough room for interpretation that although Zhao undoubtedly guessed which Iroh thought he was, the man didn't comment on it. The commander looked displeased. He looked around himself as if trying to think of an excuse to leave. Something angering your opponent was a good way to get them to slip with what they were up to, but Iroh feared that he might have pushed a bit too hard. "Forgive me if I'm boring you with nonsense. My nephew can't stand it either. Probably one of the reasons he didn't take me along." Iroh slipped. Having a conversation was like fishing, Iroh imagined. If you don't want the fish to run away, you have to give it an impression it stood a chance of winning. A back and forth motion, not unlike waterbending. The commander's eyes focused on Iroh again. "Where did you say the prince was coming back from? Whatever is it that he's doing again?" Iroh tried to look thoughtful. "The last I saw my nephew, he didn't know where exactly he was going or when he was coming back. But keeping his character and goals in mind, I dare wager he's somewhere looking for his honor." Iroh's statement was true to the word. Truth was, the best lies were made of. Zhao thought he knew Zuko's character and goals, and jumped to his own wrong conclusion about where Zuko was. Zhao didn't know there was more to the warrior than met the eye. Iroh counted himself among the very few people who understood the young prince and what drove him, but right now he wasn't certain. If I knew my nephew as well as I think I do, why didn't I have any idea where he is right now? Iroh brushed the thought aside for now. Not that I blame him for insisting on walking his path alone. Iroh sighed over a cup of tea, forming a glassy-eyed, lost my memories and not on my top game expression. Every man makes his own honor, and every man must decide for himself how to best bring glory to his nation, ancestors, and the spirits. When you agree. Iroh saw Zhao's confident smile falter for a split second. The shift in the commander's mood told Uncle he had finally pulled on the right strings. It was no secret that Zhao came from a family that had once been one of the most influential families in all the Fire Nation, but had virtually no economical or political influence anymore. To Zhao, his family's imaginary power derived from their supposedly glorious ancestry was a sore spot. From what Uncle knew, Zhao was quite different from his father and grandfather. Commander Zhao was a man who aimed to create his own glory, earn his power, forge his own destiny. Iroh could appreciate Zhao for wanting to earn his dues, but not for much else. The man craved to be remembered by future generations more than he cared about the well-being of those around him. Even taking on the position of commander, Zhao had shown he was willing to accept great sacrifices to ensure victory. Zhao smiled venomously at Iroh. I am bringing glory to my nation, for that there can be no doubt. I know little of, and care even less about the opinions of dead relatives, and when it comes to spirits. Zhao stopped to consider his next words. Spirits aren't as useless as ancestors, since they still have an effect on this world. However, they're hardly the almighty beings the uneducated masses see them as. At the end of the day, man is the ultimate player shaping the world, and if the spirits disagree, well, perhaps they need to be reminded that they're not as invincible as they like us to believe they are. If Zhao had intended to shock Iroh with this statement, he had succeeded. Iroh couldn't stop gaping at the commander. He had underestimated Zhao. Iroh had thought the man incapable of making long-term plans and keeping such plans to himself. It seemed that Zhao had come up with something big, and he'd been smart enough to keep the details of his plan to himself, at least for now. Zuko hadn't revealed what his plan was, but he had confirmed he had a plan. Iroh could work with that. One way or another, Iroh had a gnawing feeling that whatever Zhao's secret plan was, it involved the young Avatar. Present. That does sound pretty ominous. But what do you want me to do about it? Zuko asked. Normally, the prince hated it when people tried to talk him into or out of doing something. But this time, he didn't mind it. If this conversation was heading in the direction Zuko thought it was, he actually wanted to be talked into whatever it was Uncle had in mind. The Avatar can't be dangerous, but the Admiral is dangerous and ruthless. If there is something that worries me more than the thought of the air nomad running around unchecked, it is what Zhao might do if he gets his hands on the boy. If Zhao truly means what he said about killing a spirit, I fear the young airbender is in more danger than he knows. Zuko thought that over. Zhao wouldn't hesitate to do anything to get more power, and he obviously had no respect for the spirits, which makes the thought of putting the spirit of the world in his greedy hands a pretty terrifying proposition. After a while, Zuko nodded. You're right. We can't be sure Zhao would do something stupid if he got his hands on the Avatar, but the risk of him doing exactly that is too high to ignore. It was easy for Zuko to say those words. Much easier than he would have expected it to be. I keep telling myself that the Avatar's power and irresponsible nature makes him my greatest enemy, but I don't really believe that. I don't see Aang as my nemesis. He might be irritating and elusive, but I always see him as more of an objective than as a person. I don't hate him. I don't see him that way. Maybe the Avatar shouldn't be my biggest concern when people as cruel and callous as Zhao has as much power as Aang does. Zhao is in on the Fire Nation's side, and the Avatar is not, but maybe they are still equally dangerous. If anyone ever found out that Zuko had helped the Avatar in any way, for any reason, he could kiss goodbye to any chance he might still have at going home. But that just meant that the stakes were high, not that he shouldn't do it. The prince wasn't sure what the old Zuko would have decided to do. The new Zuko would live with the consequences. Come what may, Zuko got up to his feet. Where do you think you're going? Uncle asked. I'm going to go find the Avatar before Zhao does, and do whatever it takes to make sure the Admiral doesn't get his hands on the boy. At this hour? Uncle looked exaggeratedly surprised. Finding the Avatar wouldn't be easy when he's somewhere sleeping. I doubt even Zhao plans to send the archers to look for him in the dead of night. You've already been up half the night sneaking around. You should wait for morning and get some rest before setting off on your next journey. Fine. Zuko sighed. But we'll go look for the airbender first thing in the morning. We? Uncle sounded a bit taken aback. Zuko realized he may have presumed more than they had agreed on. You don't have to come with me if you don't want to. I would love to come with you. Uncle put in quick yet politely. Are you planning to bring some of the crew along as well? We could look for him faster that way. Now it was Zuko's turn to look surprised. Take my crew along? On a mission that might require me to help the Avatar escape from Zhao. Why not? Zuko shrugged. I trust them. Zuko, Iroh, and 3 crew members were packed and ready to go just before dawn. I'm sorry, Katara sighed. For what? Aang hurried to console her. He didn't want Katara to be sad under any circumstances, but especially not now when she hadn't really done anything. I get it that you're sad that Sokka isn't feeling well, but that's not anyone's fault. Aang went on sincerely. Katara shook her head. But I'm a waterbender, and waterbenders are supposed to be able to heal. That's what Shaiyu said. I'm supposed to be able to make everything better. But I don't know how. This isn't like the time when I healed the burns on Sokka's hand at Jet's place. This time, I can't see what's wrong. I don't even know where to place my hands. It's okay, Aang said. Who knows? Maybe waterbending healing doesn't even work on diseases. Or maybe I'm just the worst waterbender ever. Katara said bitterly and looked away. You're a great waterbender. You can heal and bend and all that kind of stuff. Although you've never been taught. Besides, you don't see me doing any better and I'm the Avatar. Katara looked at Aang. She smiled at him. Maybe you're right. But what do we do then? Sokka needs help. He needs medicine or... Katara couldn't finish the sentence because she had started coughing. Aang held Katara to the same position. You're not feeling too well yourself, the airbender pointed out. Let me worry about getting the medicine. According to my map, there's a herbalist institute not far from here. I'll be there and back in no time, and in the meantime, Appa will look after you. Won't you, buddy? The bison lifted his head and made a sound that Aang decided meant he agreed. Okay, off I go. The monk smiled at Katara one final time before he raced off for the Herbalist Institute on top of the next slope. Simanoki looked at Zuko like he was expecting the young man to explode. Zuko tried to keep his composure. The crew feared him enough already. Oki had just informed Zuko that the Avatar had been sighted at the ruins of Taku, not far from the current location. This would have been good news except for the information had come from Zuko's men. A local guard tower had seen the Avatar running toward an abandoned Herbalist Institute, and had sent word of this to all the nearby troops, which meant the Yu-Yan were on their way. There was still hope, though. Zuko opened his eyes and looked at his men. Iroh looked calm, the rest looked worried, waiting for his response. Zuko had told his crew that Zhao was around and acted the same thing they were, but he had mentioned the Yu-Yan, so not to discourage his men. The Yu-Yan were a bit legendary. This is what we do. I run ahead and try to get to the Herbalist Institute before any of Zhao's men get there. You will make sure that if the Avatar turns around and runs back the way he came from, he will encounter resistance. Since he's chosen to go on foot, he'll probably make a round trip back to his bison, so he's planning to return the same way he came. You'll intercept him on his way, or meet me at the Institute, whichever comes first. Understood? While Zuko spoke, he removed the few armors he had put on that morning. He was immensely grateful for having had the insight to not wear the full set of armor, since it looked like he was going to be a literal race for the Avatar. In all honesty, even if the Avatar was planning to run the same way he came back, he was unlikely to be able to do that with the Yu-Yan after him. Since Zuko was the only one with the speed and endurance to get there in time, his men couldn't possibly be any of use in capturing the Avatar. However, Zuko didn't want to say that, and he wasn't going to run off without leaving any standing orders either. Also, they had been proven useful already. Not telling them to follow me would be a waste of resources, and mine are scarce as is. The men nodded, not questioning his orders. Other men may have been surprised, but his crew seemed to be used to the prince running off alone, doing all the heavy lifting. Uncle came to say a quick farewell. He whispered, "And if the Yu-Yan are already there when you get there, will you fight the Avatar or the archers?" Zuko weighed his options briefly. Some time ago, he would have considered stopping to plan his move a waste of time, but he had grown since then. Uncle had a point. "No, I'll try to get in the Yu-Yan's way, literally if I have to, but I won't fight them. Maybe it was because Iroh looked so distressed at the thought of Zuko jumping in front of arrows, but Zuko had sudden urge to comfort the old man. Before the prince knew what he was doing, he wrapped his arms around his uncle. Iroh's body was stiff out of surprise, but he managed to hug back. Zuko whispered, "I'll be fine. Nothing crazy, I promise." The prince felt his cheeks blush. He nodded at his men, who looked almost as surprised by his action as Zuko felt like. Then he ran off into the forest, grateful for the excuse to leave in a hurry. When he got to the Herbalist Institute, Zuko knew almost immediately he had come to the right place. But the situation wasn't as hopeless as Zuko had feared. The Yuan were there already, but they appeared to have assumed the same thing Zuko had. The Avatar would come back the same way he came. Instead of following the boy inside, they had prepared an ambush for him outside the main gate. Smart. That way the archers were in good position to run after him if he tried to get away. They had plenty of open space to fire their arrows in, and the Avatar wouldn't have that many places to hide behind. They had the numbers, they had a good plan, and they were the best archers known to 4 nations. There was one thing that was working for Zuko, though. He had the element of surprise, and they would be very surprised indeed. He could barely believe what he was about to do, and he was the one about to do it. They have keen eyes, but they're not expecting company. Even if they were, a master ninja always finds a way. One way or another, there was no time to waste. The Avatar was to be warned. Entering the Herbalist Institute undetected wasn't hard. There appeared to be no other doors other than the heavily guarded main entrance, but the wall was made of rough stone and a bit fallen apart in places, which made it ideal for climbing. Zuko landed in the courtyard of the Institute. Even if Zuko moved fast and played his cards right, it was unlikely he'd be able to capture the Avatar with so many skilled combatants lurking around. What if the Avatar got away from all his would-be captors? That would be half victory in and of itself. To Zuko's surprise, although his intel had suggested otherwise, the Institute wasn't entirely abandoned. Either that or the old lady with the cat was the Avatar's newest sidekick, but Zuko seriously doubted the latter. "So this potion will heal my friends?" The Avatar finished his question, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, obviously anxious to leave. "Of course not. This is for my cat." The old grumpy healer replied, "What your friends need." Zuko was still pretty far away, but couldn't make out everything the old woman said. But that probably didn't matter. Zuko could try to sneak up on the Avatar and grab the boy, but if he didn't capture the air nomad in the first try, the kid would run straight for the trap waiting outside. His track record on capturing the Avatar on the first try wasn't impressive, but that was off the table. If he showed himself and told the kid he wanted to help him, and asked the air nomad to follow him, even the Avatar wouldn't be so naive as to say, "Okay, that's a good idea." No, he'll probably think Zuko's trying to set him up, and would run for the exact opposite direction, straight into Yu Yan's hands. Unless that was Zuko's trap. The prince didn't have time to plan further than the Avatar shouted, "Thanks for your advice. I'll be off right away." Aang started running for the door, but so did Zuko, completely abandoning his attempt to not be seen by either side. Only moments later, the Avatar was out of the Institute. Zuko jumped forward and managed to grab the boy by his ankle. They both stumbled to the ground just inside the massive doorway. The Avatar looked more surprised and curious than worried when he wondered out loud, "It's you again?" Zuko had scratched his knees and hands when falling, and was still out of breath from all the running. But he tried to sound menacing and replied, "Yes, it's me, Prince Zuko, here to capture you." Zuko didn't think he sounded convincing. Worry blatant in his voice, but he hoped that the Yu Yan were close enough to hear. They would have realized to question the sincerity of his statement. The Avatar at least didn't notice anything out of place. "Oh no, now is really a bad time. My friends are sick and they could be in real danger. If I don't get medicine to them as soon as possible, could we maybe reschedule?" Zuko blinked. He hadn't expected this. Whatever's going on with Katara and Sokka is going to have to wait. My first priority is to make sure the Avatar gets away. Whether he realizes it or not, I'm actually doing him a favor. Because if the Yu-Yan capture Aang, he won't be able to get back to his friends at all. Granted, if Zuko captured the Avatar himself, he wouldn't be able to return his friends all the same. Fortunately, Zuko wouldn't have to choose between capturing the Avatar and making sure Katara and Sokka were okay. Not today, as numbingly odd as it was. Today, they were all on the same side. Zuko got up and shouted, "You're not going to get away from me this time, especially not in the direction where the ambush waits you. Dozens of archers. You'll never escape them all." The Avatar looked around himself, awfully baffled, so Zuko specified, "Over there in the trees." Zuko pointed to where the Yu-Yan were waiting. If the archers had been wondering if the prince was there to help them, they would by now, at the very least, guess the word they were looking for would be competition. Shameless competition. If Zuko got into trouble for this later, he could always put his treason on incompetence and foolish arrogance. He had been so sure of the Fire Nation's superiority that he had accidentally revealed their plan to the Avatar. These things happen. It wasn't believable, but it was plausible, and that was good enough for Zuko. As the Avatar turned around to look at the trees, Zuko took advantage of the last chance he would get to convince the boy before he would undoubtedly start running to some random direction. "See, the Yu-Yan are the best archers in the world. Even you won't be able to outrun them. You know you should run in that direction." Actually, Zuko wasn't sure if the Avatar would be able to outrun them should he run in any direction. But he had to try something. The other direction, where rocky and hard climbs, which is probably why the Yu-Yan had been so confident the Avatar would choose the main one. However, maybe the Avatar, if anyone, would be able to climb the steep cliffs and get away. The Avatar looked worried but determined. "That does sound better, but I think I'll take my chances. The swamp is that way, and the frozen frogs really can't wait." Zuko stood there gaping at the boy, wondering if he was serious or not, missing the one crucial moment when the Avatar sprang into motion and rounded the gate. That was all it took for the arrows to start raining down on the boy. Theoretically, Zuko could have gone after the Avatar. He might have done exactly that if it wasn't for the fact he had only moments ago promised Uncle he wouldn't do anything extremely risky or foolish. The archers were so good that when they wanted to capture someone alive, they caught that someone alive. The problem was that they weren't here for him. They were here for the Avatar, and Zuko wasn't sure they would do if the prince got in the way. They wouldn't probably kill me if they could avoid it, but without a reason. Although maybe my behavior so far is reason enough. They could easily shoot me by accident if I just kept jumping in the line of fire. Hell, for all I know, Zhao has given them standing orders to shoot Prince Zuko on sight. No, of course he hasn't. He couldn't have. Father would never allow it. I may be banished, but I'm not the enemy. There's a difference between unwanted and wanted. The Avatar was somehow able to duck the first wave of arrows. The second wave, which followed immediately after the first, the airbender attempted to block with a wave of air. But it didn't work. Several arrows hit him in the shoe. But he wiggled free and kept running. Of course, airbending didn't work. The Yu-Yan were legendary for being pretty accurate archers. They were renowned for their accuracy, but also for their dedication to their art. They were so one with their bows that they could put great strength in their attacks, making their arrows move fast and hit hard. Some even claimed the Yu-Yan could transfer some of their own chi into their arrows. Zuko didn't know if that was true. The squad wasn't keen on sharing practicing tips to anyone, even though the citizens of the Fire Nation, but the logic seemed believable. The prince knew from experience that chi could be used for other things than just bending. Bending always required chi, but one didn't have to be a bender to exploit one's chi in a fight. The Avatar may be the most powerful being on the planet, but he was nowhere near as dedicated and prepared as his opponents were. Zuko feared the outcome of the battle had been determined the minute it had begun. There was nothing he or the Avatar could do to prevent the inevitable. He was right. To Iroh's horror, Zuko was nowhere to be seen when he and the crew finally reached the Herbalist Institute. There were arrows sticking from the ground, But other than that, you couldn't have been told a battle took place here only a few moments ago. Before Uncle had time to look for his nephew, Zuko emerged from the woods, running toward them. Arrow felt relieved. He considered running to meet the young man, and maybe even hug him, but decided against it when he saw the look on Zuko's face. Disappointed, mainly, but there was also a burning in his nephew's eyes Arrow knew too well. Zuko wouldn't give up this easily. This wasn't over yet. The Yuyan, Zuko said shortly, and nodded toward the arrows. The 3 crew members exchanged bewildered glances. Zuko walked up to them and continued his briefing of sorts. Working for Zhao. They're here for the Avatar. Did they capture him? Arrow asked in a measured tone. Zuko closed his eyes, but when he opened them, he answered, "No." "What do you mean, no?" One of the crewmen blurted out. "This is the Yuyan we're talking about." "The Avatar isn't just anyone either," Arrow reminded them. He nodded to Zuko, who nodded back to him. They were in a mutual understanding. They both knew Zuko was lying. Uncle believed he could guess why, and in any case, he wasn't going to call his nephew out on his bluff. "The last I saw," Zuko went on, "the Avatar is still running. I'll go after him as soon as I've done giving you these orders." Even though the Yuyan had caught the Avatar, whatever Zuko had come back to say to them had to be very important for him to come back at all. I was curious to hear what had been more important than keeping up the chase with the Yuyan. The Avatar's water tribe allies are ill. From what I've been able to gather, they're probably the same disease Jury had. The Avatar caught or running won't be able to return to them for a while. So I was thinking, we could take the water tribe kids as our prisoners? Yes, that's the word, prisoners. Everyone looked at the prince, too astonished to say anything. It makes sense, right? We have medicine for what they got and experience in treating it. And once they're better, we could, use them as Avatar bait? Zuko's explanation came out more like a question, but Arrow understood perfectly what he was trying to say. Uncle was touched by the fact that Zuko had, despite his hurry to follow the Yuyan, decided to take a moment to make sure his crew had orders that the Avatar's friends would be taken care of even if the Avatar would never return to them. "Where are they?" Arrow asked simply, as if there was nothing unusual or illogical about Zuko's orders phased like a question. "I'm not exactly sure, but the Avatar kept glancing at that peak." Zuko pointed to a cliff. "Whenever he mentioned his friends. They're probably in one of those caves up there." Zuko appeared to be figuring out what his plan was as he explained it. "I want you to go there and look for the Avatar's entourage. Don't forget that even if the kids are ill, the bison can still be dangerous. If you find them, take them to the ship and treat them. If you don't find them, return to the ship anyway." Uncle nodded at him. He wasn't sure if he liked Zuko's plan, but he wouldn't question it in front of the men. "And we are to stay there and wait for your return?" Zuko shook his head. "No. Zhao might know where we docked and might try to make it difficult for us to leave. When you get back to the ship, raise anchor and sail out to the sea. We'll rendezvous at the next port north of here." Zuko nodded, as if the matter was covered and taken care of. Uncle disagreed. He deserved more answer than this. He walked up to Zuko. The teenager knew what was coming, but rather than trying to leave, he waited for Uncle to reach him. He never did run from a battle, even if that of Will's. "What exactly are you planning to do?" Arrow whispered. "They're taking in a Pie-Ho stronghold, so that's where I'm going as well." "I didn't ask where." Zuko looked puzzled for a moment. Then he said, "I know you don't want Zhao to get the Avatar, but I think there's still a way we can save this. The Avatar could still escape. I'll wear a mask. They won't know it's me." Arrow could barely believe his ears. "You're planning to take on an entire stronghold alone as a blue spirit? Who, if I don't entirely mistaken, isn't even a bender. Is that your plan?" For a brief moment, Zuko looked surprised that Uncle knew about his secret alter ego, and I figured out his plan so accurately. Finally he managed, "No?" Uncle looked at the teenager with his "you can't lie to me and you know it" look. Zuko pinched the bridge of his nose. "Fine, that's my plan. But it'll work." Iroh sighed. Zuko lifted his gaze, and Iroh saw something he had expected. There was worry, and even a hint of fear in Zuko's eyes. "Is that it?" the prince asked. "What do you mean?" Uncle asked back, generally puzzled by his nephew's response. "I just admitted to you that I'm planning to commit treason. Not some small trick that might keep the Avatar, our nation's #1 enemy, from our Navy's reach. No, I'm going to go full traitor, infiltrate our base, and break him out of it. I'll probably have to fight our own soldiers to do that. What I'm planning to do is wrong." Iroh wasn't sure what to say. He knew that nothing he said would lessen the nagging doubt in his nephew's mind. He'd gone through something similar after Ba Sing Se, questioning things you had always believed in was necessary. But although it got easier with age and experience, it never got easy. Iroh wished he could tell Zuko it was okay, but he had done his best and that was all that mattered. But he didn't. Too much was at stake. Even if Iroh would be able to put aside his responsibilities toward the world, the young prince wouldn't play along. He would go through his dangerous plan anyway. Zuko has made his decision, and all Uncle could do was support him in it. He would, just like he always did, be there to help his nephew find his own way, if today that meant attacking a stronghold. "Prince Zuko, I know you better than anyone, so trust me when I tell you you are not a traitor. You want to do what's right, do what's in the best interest of those you care about." Zuko cut in, shaking his head. "Yes, I know. I'm not going after Zhao because it's the right thing to do or anything that noble. I'm going after him because if Zhao wins, I can never go home again, or prove my worth, and I'm not even sure I still want to go back. It's just that for so long, it's all I wanted. The only thing that made keep going makes sense." Zuko's voice broke a bit, and Iroh ceased a moment. Right and wrong aren't always simple to determine. No one, not even the Fire Lord, knows everything. No one can know what the right thing to do is, every situation is. All we have is our hearts. If your hearts tell you to help the Avatar escape, Iroh closed his eyes, then that's what you should do. I don't know why I should do. You don't think I should do it, Zuko said solemnly. Only because I worry for you. But that's the only reason. You already know where I stand on the issue at large. As far as I'm concerned, there's nothing wrong with what you're planning to do. In some situations, it's difficult to determine what the right thing to do is, but this isn't one of them. However, the decision is openly yours and yours alone. Zuko nodded, and after a while he said, I have to go. I have a few more questions before you go. Purely practical stuff, Uncle put in. What do you want us to do with the Water Tribe kids? Zuko looked uncomfortable. Truth be told, I don't want them to stay too long on my ship. Iroh guessed as much. I figured that since I or Zhao will probably end up holding the Avatar by the end of the night, someone has to go get the Water Tribe kids and help them. But I don't want them as my prisoners. The Avatar is the one I need. I want you guys to get them to the ship, get them treated, and then get them out. If I capture the Avatar, I might have to go to the Fire Nation in a hurry. And then they might end up along for the ride, and we might have to keep them as our prisoners for real. After I got the Avatar, they wouldn't agree to escape without their friend, and we might have to give them all three to the Fire Nation. Perhaps it would be simpler if they had made a full recovery. The Water Tribe siblings were to escape on their own? Iroh suggested. Zuko nodded. Iroh was rather excited about this part of Zuko's plan. It provided with them unprecedented possibilities. Should be interesting to get to know Katara and Sokka a bit better. And who knows, with a little luck, the Water Tribe siblings might learn a thing or two about the pursuers as well. Then to my second question. Our return to the situation at hand. This harbor up north. I'm not going to ask how you plan on getting there, but I am a little curious as to how you plan on dragging the Avatar along as well. Wouldn't it be easier if we stay here and wait for your return? No, I thought about that, but the problem boils down to Zaru knowing that the ship is here. Or at least being able to find her pretty quickly. After I show up here, he'll know I'm up to something, and if the Avatar escapes, he might put 2 and 2 together and come looking for the Avatar from my ship. Even if the air nomad isn't there, he'll find the Water Tribe, and I don't know what he'll do with them, but I understand. Though, do you really have to go after the Avatar alone, since it stands to presume he's been taken to Piehole Stronghold, and our ship is almost on the way there? Couldn't you come with us back to the ship where we plan further? Zuko looked a bit apologetic, but unwavering. I've already lost the Avatar once today, because I wasn't fast enough. I don't intend to repeat the mistake. For all we know, Zhao plans to ship him to the Fire Nation right away. Also, Zuko sighed, I don't think it'd be wise to put me and the Avatar's bison in close proximity. I doubt the animal would let that happen either. Uncle saw that Zuko had given his plan more thought than he usually did, which was at least of some small comfort. Which leads us to my final question, and perhaps the most important of all. What exactly do we do about a 10-ton bison? Zuko was running across the woods for the second time that day. The sun was slowly setting behind the mountains, throwing long shadows around him. Zuko had with him his dhow, some rope, and a satchel containing his sneaking outfit. He was grateful for having brought his blue spirit gear along this morning. Perhaps a part of him knew that he would end up attacking Piehole Stronghold from the get-go. Another part of Zuko missed his old life, not the one where he lived in the palace. Sure, Kazuo, a part of him missed that too. But right now, he missed, above all else, the certainty with which the banishment but determined Zuko had to handle things. His life had been so much easier when all he expected to do was follow orders and capture the Avatar. Of course now, Zuko knew it had never been that simple, but a part of him still wished it was. Somehow, even after learning what his father had been willing to do to him when he was only 10 years old, a part of Zuko hadn't given up hope. Hope that one day he knows I could get along, that they could be a real family. It's all I ever wanted. Zuko sighed. In the light of the recent events and the journey he was about to embark on, the odds of that happening seemed more distant than ever before. Still, odds and rational thinking with nothing to do with hope. But Zuko wasn't a child anymore. He knew that just because he wanted something to be a certain way didn't mean it would be. Maybe it was due time to find new things to want. A flash of movement called Zuko's attention. He froze in place, listening for sounds of someone moving. He heard nothing. He hid in the dark shadow thrown by a large oak. Zuko almost laughed to himself when he realized that his reaction to whatever was out there was not that of Prince Zuko, but that of the blue spirit. At least getting into the right state of mind shouldn't be a problem. Then he saw it again, a shadow moving across the path. Zuko looked up, and upon recognizing the massive figure hovering above him, he stepped out of his hiding place. You! Zuko said and pointed his finger at the right dragon spirit. Have some explaining to do.